Man, what a weekend it was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. First time visiting Pittsburgh, and I absolutely had a blast. They usually say time flies when you're having fun, and I feel like the weekend literally was over before it even started. My body, I still feel, is in Pittsburgh, but my mind is here concentrating on what's next to come. The entirety of the next month or so is going to be incredibly busy. I got House of Glory, I got SummerSlam, I got All In. It's going to be great. And I can't wait for everything to just come on in, man, because I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, and I want to just get out there and be the very best that I can be for you guys. Sunday, right before Extreme Rules, I had the honor, the privilege, and the pleasure of sitting down with the franchise, Shane Douglas, for part 3 of Off the Script. There was no script. There was no notes. We just hit record and we talked professional wrestling. And I don't think I have come across anyone as nice as Shane Douglas, man. He was an absolute professional. And he was gracious for everything that happened on Sunday, man. Meeting with me, meeting with fans, and he was the nicest down-to-earth guy I think I probably ever come across so far in my very young career in the wrestling industry. And it was a blast. And I hope you guys enjoy what you're about to hear. Shane Douglas on Off the Script, and we talked literally everything WWE that is important today. We touched on NXT. We touched on the new Fox, NBC, Universal TV deals. We talked about our favorites today. We talked about Roman Reigns. We talked about some of the early days in his ECW career. We talked about beer. Shane Douglas is a big craft beer guy, and you're looking at Mr. Craft Beer himself. And it all rolled into about 50 minutes or so, came out, and it was one of the best things that I ever did, man. So I hope you guys enjoy what you're about to hear with Shane Douglas on this very rare episode of Off the Script to conclude last weekend's show. This is part number 3, man. I want to thank everybody that made this possible. Brian Goulash and Matt from Wrestle Rumble. You guys are absolutely incredible, and I thank you for literally everything this weekend. Matt, I told you via text, thank you for your hospitality, and thank you for taking care of me all weekend. You are unbelievable, and I can't wait to have some fun with you in Chicago for All In. Brian, thank you so much for everything, man. You opened up your home and your family to me. It was great meeting everybody, and I enjoyed literally every aspect of hanging out with you, man. I can't wait to do it again. It's got to be sooner rather than later, and I thank you for taking care of me and getting literally everything situated for this entire weekend, man. I am incredibly lucky that I have 2 guys like you in my corner, and more importantly, friends. You guys are family to me. So thank you guys so very much for everything. And I can't wait, like I said, to do it again. Man, here we go. Here we go. Shane Douglas on Off the Script. Let me know what you guys think down below. I'm going to get out of here. I'll see you guys tonight for SmackDown Live. If you missed anything so far that I uploaded, Extreme Rules and Monday Night Raw are live right now. Reviews are live on the channel as we speak. This is Off the Script. This is episode 230, part number 3 on your Tuesday afternoon. Shane Douglas goes off the script. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a cold Guinness, and I got the franchise, Shane Douglas, sitting right next to me. The best ECW champion of all time, in my honest opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Good being here.
We are, literally in the background is the PPG Paints Arena. Extreme Rules tonight. We're going. Me and my crew are going. It's going to be a great time. And the franchise is here. We're going to be talking the pay-per-view. We're going to be talking the current state of the WWE product because I would love his opinion on it. You guys know how I've been about the product. Shane, my biggest thing with the product today is just how it's perceived, and I feel like there's a change in the wrestling world nowadays. Whatever WWE is doing is not what the fans want, in my honest opinion. What do you think needs to be done to correct what WWE is doing wrong?
Well, let me start just by supporting something you just said. I call them my Twitter kids. Nick Bazzelli and Brian Chichak. They helped me get onto Twitter and teach me the whole part, because I'm an old guy. All this technology stuff is new school to me. And Nick said to me about a year ago, he said, I wish I was old enough to be a fan when you were champion, And I said, who wants to be older than they are? I said, why would you say that? And he said, well, because when you were wrestling, it was still cool to be a wrestling fan. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, hold on. I said, you mean it's not still cool to be a wrestling fan? And he said, no. He said, if you're a wrestling fan today, you get made fun of, and which was completely incongruous to me, because when we were wrestling, and I came up in the footsteps of Roddy Piper and Hardy Race and Dominic Canucci, Bruno Sammartino, these guys, they were rock stars. I mean, anybody that met them was like mesmerized in meeting them. And so to hear that sort of took me back. But I think to get to your question, how do we get it back to that? Hey, let's start with the facts. These kids today are, my generation was more athletic than, say, Bruno's generation. Doesn't mean we were tougher or better wrestlers, but we were more athletic in the ring than Bruno's generation. These kids today are jaw-droppingly athletic.
Absolutely.
I mean, I watch them, and I'll see them literally defy gravity, and it just makes my brain snap. Like, how do they do this? Here's the difference. When I was a young snot-nosed kid and didn't know how to lace my boots, I was watching in the dressing room. How are these guys, these heroes of mine, how are they unpacking their bag? What do they put on first? Their tights, their boots, their socks, what? At the end of the night, how do they take their stuff off? How do they pack it back in the bag? That's what I was watching. But I was also in the ring working with these guys. And every night, and making a Herculean share of mistakes in the ring. But that's how you learn. Whether it was Pez Whatley, Dick Murdoch, Dick Slater, Eddie Gilbert, Terry Taylor, the guys that I was working with when I got my break into the business, I didn't know it at the time, but they were piece by piece teaching me the industry. And so I think to get it back to that today with these kids that do these astounding athletic moves and spots in the ring, what's missing is somebody to take them by the nose, like I was, and teach them, you don't do this before you do that. Or if you're going to do that, you have to do this first. That's not being done today. All those kids in the dressing room with all their athleticism, they're all around the same level. There was nothing I could learn from Mick Foley or Cody Michaels or Brian Hildebrand, because we were all at the same level. I had to be in the ring with the Pez Whatleys and Dick Murdochs and Dick Slaters and Terry Funks to learn my craft and to take it to that level. That's what I think is missing. And I think until you put that back into the equation, you're going to see what we're seeing now. A lot of athleticism, a lot of flying, and what we all call the spot monkeys, right? So, and that's, look, I ain't railing for a job. I don't need one. I don't want to go back to work. But that's what's missing from the business today. You have guys that so many, like say an Al Snow or a Bully Ray. You have these guys that are out there that have so much experience, and that's how this business gets handed down. Like any industry, if your dad was a mechanic, I'm sure at some point he taught you how to turn a screwdriver or a ratchet. Yeah. In this business, same thing. But all those that know how to turn the ratchet or the screwdriver have been sanitized out of the business by the WWE.
Are you a fan of what NXT is doing?
Yes.
And do you think if WWE, I've said this on my show almost every week, if WWE took some of what they are doing in NXT and applied it to Raw, SmackDown, Monday and Tuesday night, do you think it would be a better overall show and more fans would be open up to the product?
Absolutely. Here's my question. When, and again, so it's my business acumen, right? Vince just sold the rights to SmackDown to Fox for $1.2 billion. But if I want you to come to my ice cream stand, and I'm giving vanilla every day, if I suddenly add chocolate or pistachio or White House cherry, I might get some more people to come that don't like vanilla.
It's actually a very good analogy.
And so, when they brought SmackDown back and repackaged SmackDown, in my estimation, for what it's worth, SmackDown is a watered-down version of Raw. Same type of product, but with the lesser names, etc. So why not give the WWE fans an option? On Monday, you can watch the sports entertainment, and on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever day, you can watch NXT. One being sports entertainment, and the other one being much closer, albeit not completely back to old school wrestling, but much closer to professional wrestling. I wonder why, if Vince McMahon were sitting here, what would his answer be? Why did I not give my fans that option? And you'd have to, I don't know the answer. I'd be dying to hear it.
Do you think Triple H, if and when he eventually takes over, we don't know, do you think his vision would be better than what we're getting right now? Do you trust in what he's doing so far on the job that he's doing with NXT UK and NXT and just embracing the indie scene?
Well,
do you think that he's going to continue on that path if and when he eventually takes over?
Again, let me ask you the question. If your dad taught you how to turn the screw or the ratchet, and when you suddenly took over the garage, would you turn the screw or ratchet differently than your dad did, or the way he taught you?
The way he taught me.
So Hunter learned from Vince, and let's be honest, Vince. I mean, you can't escape the part of the equation that Vince McMahon has been stunningly successful at what he's done.
Yes.
So if I was going to follow, if I was Shane or Stephanie or Hunter, following in that giant's footsteps, would I go my own path and try to carve a new direction, or would I follow what made that guy a billionaire? My guess is they're going to follow his footsteps. When I see, like with NXT, let's use NXT as a microcosm. When Dusty Rhodes was booking NXT, I mean, let's face it, Dusty Rhodes knew how to create a character, how to write a storyline and an angle, and put it out there in a compelling fashion. And when he started getting sick, if you go back and watch the shows at the time when Dusty started getting sick and then dies, and then you watch NXT from the point where he starts to getting sick and moving forward, it goes from being this stunningly good wrestling show to being something like an amalgamation of wrestling and sports entertainment, which leads me to believe that Hunter would go in the sports entertainment direction.
I haven't thought of it that way. I personally haven't seen that aspect from what you see in NXT. I think it actually has maintained the essence of when Dusty was there.
Well, again, it's much closer. I'm not going to watch a second of it tonight. I'm sure you guys will. But
Shane doesn't give a shit about Extreme Rules.
I'm sure we're going to see sports entertainment in all its grandiosity tonight. But for me, Hunter's a part of that, and Vince is a larger than life personality. So if it would get back to what it was meant to be in NXT, I'm all for that. But again, I think when you look at the dichotomy of when he had the option to choose, do I rebrand SmackDown and bring a lesser version of Raw to the table, or do I put NXT, which at that time was selling out the New York Islanders arena and pretty big buildings around the country, he opted not to do that and bring back SmackDown. So I don't know. I mean, how big are Vince's footprints? I would say pretty large. So where will Hunter fall down? We won't know until Vince McMahon is dead and gone, because somebody asked me the other day, but how much is Hunter doing? How much is Stephanie doing? How much is Shane doing? And I said, look, in my estimation, anything you're watching has Vince McMahon's fingerprints all over it, because Vince McMahon is as much of a narcissist as that man is. He's not going to give you or me the right to say, let's put this in segment 1 or 2. The show that you see aired from segment A to B to C to D all the way to the main event has Vince McMahon's rubber stamp on it, or it wouldn't be there. That's
Absolutely.
Just the way it is.
You mentioned Vince being, pretty much wanting to be in control of every aspect.
Yeah.
With NXT, what is your opinion on some of the failed talent that comes up from NXT that we think, at first glance and, through a year or two down in NXT, that they're going to be this big thing on the main roster? And then when they get to the main roster, it's as if all that work that went into making us care, they don't make us care anymore, and they pretty much kill off what NXT built. Is that a Vince McMahon thing, where it's controlling, that Triple H, created this character and we embraced it, and then when Vince gets his hands on it, it's like, nah, I got to do it my way.
Yes. So
what do you think about that?
Well, how many kids have you seen come up from NXT, and when they get to the main roster, right, their name goes from being Shane Douglas to being Dean Douglas, or you rarely see somebody go from NXT as that character and step seamlessly into that and become that character there. When you see Kurt Hennig's son, Curtis Axel. Now, if my name was, if I was Terry Bradshaw's son, as we sit here in the Steel City, and Shane Bradshaw was a great quarterback, and Vince got his hands and said, let's call him Joe Blow. Why would you not want that Bradshaw name? It doesn't make sense. And when your name's Hennig in the professional wrestling industry, from Larry the Axe Hennig to Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, I can't understand. I've heard stories that Curtis Axel wanted to sort of get away from him. I don't buy it. I don't buy that you'd want to rub your grandfather.
When he won the Intercontinental Championship, the first thing he did was hold the championship up in memory of his father.
Exactly.
Why would he want to get away from it?
Exactly. And yet that's the story, the narrative that we've been told is that he wanted to change his name and get away from that, at least from what I've heard. So it gets back to what you're asking about NXT. These kids go out and they work their asses off, and they make a large chunk of fans care about them and want to follow their careers. And then they get to the main roster and they get the name change and the gimmick change. And then they're told, instead of wrestling those 10, 12, 18, 20-minute matches you've been doing, now wrestle 4 minutes and go out and do this and this. And don't worry about the matches. It's all about television. It's all a show. So is football. When I turn on the NFL on Sunday, it's a television show that's being beamed into my box in my house. But when I watch it, if they suddenly say, well, running the football is not important, catching the football is not important, the blocking is not important, just look good on camera. Well, you'd have to wonder what kind of a queer type of product you would get in football if you took all those, if you sanitized all those basics of football out. And I think that's what we see in sports entertainment.
Yeah. With that, who do you think in NXT, going back to what we were talking about before, who do you think in NXT right now, outside of the controlling of Vince McMahon, like if you took them right now, who do you say in NXT would absolutely 100% be successsul on the main roster?
Well, I can't tell you because I haven't had a chance to see it. We don't get it in our cable. Our cable took it off several months ago, maybe close to a year ago. So I've not been able to watch it. So when you're asking the questions about what NXT is today, I'm going off based on what I had seen the last time of it. And so I really couldn't tell you. I just know that in that system, it's when you try to corporatize learning something like professional wrestling, it can't be done by committee. You can't take a group of 10 or 20 guys or men or women and say, okay, let's see, you should be a cowboy and because you wear cowboy boots, or you should be this or you should be that. It has to be done. All of it has to be done. The same way that Scott Irwin years and years ago told me, when I asked him how he and his brother Bill came up with the Wild Hogs, and he said, he laughed, he chuckled at me, and he said, well, if we weren't in wrestling, we'd be in a bar someplace kicking somebody's ass. This is what we are. And then he told me, don't try to think of anything different or unique, because everything's been done. We've had cowboys and Indians, we've had mummies and monsters and dead men coming back to life. He said, if you want to create a character that's memorable, go back and find those wrestlers that are in the vein that your style is, that you admire, and then take a little piece of each of them, and then and the last thing he said to me was, and put a big heaping chunk of yourself into that. And so if you watch the franchise character, anybody that watched it can certainly see Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Barry Windham, Brad Armstrong, and Terry Funk. There are pieces of all those characters wrapped into that. But the biggest part of it is Troy Martin, who Troy Martin is. But if you tell me to go out and act to be, say, a gay cowboy, I wouldn't be very good at it, because A, I'm not a cowboy, I'm not gay, and anybody that was would look at that and say, he's being disingenuous. He's not really gay, and he's not really a cowboy, and therefore he's being condescending. We just saw, who's the actress that got rummed out of the movie because she was playing a transgender role. She plays she's the Black Widow in the.
I forgot her name. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, though.
She just got drummed out of the movie because
yeah.
she wasn't really a transgender. And the transgender community came out and said, wait a second, why her and not somebody else that really is a transgender? I think today more than ever in the politically correct society that we live in, if you said, here's a young Shane Douglas and he's a gay cowboy, and anybody found out that I wasn't really gay and I wasn't a cowboy, then suddenly that would be me being condescending and shouldn't be playing that role. So it gets back, it's astounding. 40 years later, hearing Scott Irwin and what he told me is as prescient today as it was 40 years ago.
I heard you talking to some of the fans that came out to see you today about this massive TV deal that WWE has with Fox and then NBC Universal for Raw. With their move to Fox next year, I'm pretty sure it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out WWE is going to be big on the ratings, or Fox is going to be big on the ratings.
Sure.
WWE probably is going to have to put on much better television than what they're doing now.
Yeah.
Whether that happens or not, I don't know. If they do, and SmackDown becomes the overall #1 show because they're pulling in the most money. If SmackDown starts to do Raw, do you think that is going to start infiltrating over to Monday Night Raw?
Well, first of all, Raw, we know the numbers from SmackDown, from Fox, 1.2 billion,
Yeah.
but they tripled the 150 million for Raw on NBC Universal, so 450 to 500 million per year. So that's an over $2 billion deal over 5 years. So I don't think you're going to see much of anything change. The only thing you can do to increase those ratings is you've got to reach out, and I'll bore you for a quick second to show you how much I understand about the numbers. We've had, when there were the three companies, WCW, WWF, and ECW, when those three companies were still in existence, there was an average of 48 to 52 million fans watching professional wrestling every week in America. Forget the rest of the world. Forget Canada, Mexico, Europe, and all the rest of the country, the world. We had that, in this country alone, 48 to 52 million fans watching. Now, and I wanted to keep it on my thing here so I could read the numbers to you. The numbers that we had this week from Raw, let me just get to it to make sure I get the right numbers, was that it was the lowest Raw in the history of Raw, a 1.73 rating, down from last week's 1.8, which today is like 1.12 million fans. So we're in really low territory when you consider that there were 48 to 52 million fans watching back then. If I'm selling whatchamacallits, I don't want to sell them to 2 or 3 million fans. I want to sell them to the 48 to 50 million fans that have left. And I don't see those fans coming back. I hear it weekly, JD, with fans at shows and conventions and events coming up and saying, I grew up, I'm the world's biggest wrestling fan, and it's always a version of some amalgamation of what I'm about to tell you. I'm the world's biggest wrestling fan. I've watched since I was a kid, but I stopped watching a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because I just gave up. And I'm sure you've heard that from how many people. You know, and when you look at the numbers and you understand the numbers, like I'm just reading to you here, and we watch the show, again, this is not a reflection on the show today and any individual of the kids that are in the dressing room. This is as a company, looking at the company and the industry. We've seen a massive hemorrhage of fans from our industry. And I've seen nothing, you know, most people, if I was General Motors and selling cars, and I went from selling 50 million cars to 40 million cars, to 10 million cars, to 5 million, to 3 million, to 2 million. At what point would General Motors say, time out, we've got a problem. We're doing something wrong? My guess would be a 1%.
But do they think that they're doing something wrong? That's the question.
Yes, absolutely.
Or they don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care.
How many times have you heard Vince say, while pouring rain at the Pirates game, how many times have you heard Vince McMahon say when he's asked, about professional wrestling, and they'll stop the interviewer and say, no, you're talking about my father's business. My father was in professional wrestling. I'm in sports entertainment. So I can very clearly delineate between sports entertainment and professional wrestling, because I've been a professional wrestler. I've seen where the industry has gone. I never went to the ring, and if I would have tried to go to the ring and vomit up every move that I knew in 5 minutes, I'd have got my ass beat by Pez Whatley or Dick Slater or Dick Murdoch or Terry Funk. You have to learn to tell a story in the ring. So a couple years ago, I was paid to go to a pay-per-view, and I forget the name. It was, I think, in January or February. It was when Seth Rollins was wrestling Samoa Joe. So the big build-up, the vignette build-up to the match was Seth Rollins had these 2 serious knee injuries, 2 serious knee surgeries, and they leave the question rhetorical, will Samoa Joe go after Seth Rollins' knee? Of course he's going to go after his knee. And if not, he's an idiot. And I'm incredibly impressed with Samoa Joe. Have been since I worked with him in TNA as head of talent relations. So he goes after the knee, and he's working the knee for 10 plus minutes. And at one point, he goes for a clothesline that Seth ducks after having his bad knee worked on for 10 minutes. Jumps on the rope, does a moonsault over top of Samoa Joe, and then starts running like this for 2 minutes. At which point, he gets clotheslined, and he falls down. And what does he do? He grabs his knee. Now, how could you run for 2 minutes and do that moonsault with a bad knee? That's what I'm talking about, telling a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you get that far away from that equation, 2 and 2 now becomes 6. You can't just say, well, everybody out there understands what I'm doing. And this is Vince's contention. It's just a TV show, so everybody understands. They just sort of get. So when I tap you like that, you run all the way to that wall and run back while I clothesline you. It makes you play a dumbass, doesn't it? You've got to have some A leads to B leads to C. When you read a book, you don't read chapter 1, then go to chapter 10, and then go, well, let's go back in chapter 2 and see what was in 2. Now I want to jump to 16 and come back to 3. No, you go chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. It has to be laid out in a segment that everybody can digest, understand, and comprehend. And I don't see that in sports entertainment.
I don't either. And that's why I think a lot of people nowadays are embracing Ring of Honor, New Japan, which is also something I wanted to ask you about with the announcement of the G1 Supercard next year in Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
That's huge. To me, I think it's huge for multiple reasons. One reason, TakeOver's happening the same night, and Triple H is going to bring his A game. He's not going to get beat out by New Japan.
Right.
So it's going to be good for the fans in general.
Yeah.
2, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, whenever their contract is up, they may land the most lucrative deal in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
Just because of that. Because Vince McMahon is going to say, okay, you're going to come into my city, now I'm going to take your guys. That's the way I perceive it.
Yeah.
But do you think this announcement is going to ruffle feathers in WWE? How big of an announcement was that for New Japan Ring of Honor?
Huge. I mean, in war terms, they talk about a shot across the bow, right? So like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Russian ships tried to run the blockade, they were told, the American ships were told to shoot over the bow. That's like, take another and we're going to shoot and we'll sink you. That was from New Japan as big a shot as more than could be done if you said, you had one of your top stars like Okada or Omega say, we're coming WWE. That was as big a shot as they're in their backyard. And we just heard of Ring of Honor and getting into Madison Square Garden. Vince has pressure right now, and he should. It's a wide open market. No industry gets to sit back and say, okay, Lee Iacocca, you get to control the auto industry or whatever, fill in the name of the blank of the name television person. You get to control TV. The person that gives the best product is the person that gets to win the day in that industry. I honestly begin to ask myself, as I watch the WWE product, has Vince McMahon gotten old? The Vince McMahon that I remember was formidable. I remember being in WCW after I left ECW, and it wasn't often, but there were those rare nights that WCW put on a damn good show. And when you go back and you watch Vince's show, I always felt like the Roadrunner or the Coyote trying to grab the Roadrunner. When we were good, he was better. And it was frustrating as hell. I don't see that in Vince anymore. And I think in large part because the total lack of competition.
Absolutely.
But I think New Japan, being in San Francisco, last week, week before, and now this big announcement about the New York show is huge. It's a shot across the bow because you can damn well bet New Japan ain't bringing sports entertainment and they ain't coming with their B show. They're going to knock the ball out of the park.
Tonight we got Extreme Rules, and I poked fun on my show. It really isn't extreme, and I think WWE should get away from these gimmick pay-per-views. They got 11 matches on the show. Realistically, 2 of them only have Extreme Rules, attached to it.
Yeah.
One of them being for the Raw Women's Championship. Who on this show are you most excited to see? Like outside the 11 matches, we got Rollins, Ziggler, Iron Man match. What are you looking forward to tonight, man?
Well, I'm excited to see Kane back, Glenn Jacobs. He's just come off the big running for office and doing his public service with Daniel Bryan. I think that's an impressive thing to see him back. Who knows who they're going to put over? I mean, that's a question. Because nothing. My way of thinking and going into the WWE dressing room doesn't translate. So if I would say, well, this is where I would go, this is where the industry would go. So you really can't say. But in my estimation, in that match, when you have Daniel Bryan, whose contract is up very soon.
I actually heard as of today he resigned.
Oh, he'd resigned?
Yeah.
Okay, so my news as recently as a couple hours ago was that he hadn't. So that changes the equation. And this is like the part of it that makes you start to think. I don't know. I mean, I think the fans will be excited to see Kane back. Every fan that follows the industry knows that Kane, Glenn Jacobs, has been out running for public office, and he's got his name out there in a big way. And let's face it, here in Pittsburgh is where the Daniel Bryan phenomenon took hold.
Absolutely.
So I think if you're not going to put them over, you're going to have a hell of a backlash from the fans, I would say. So it's that's the match that I would be most interested to see tonight.
That's interesting. Everybody's been saying Rollins, Ziggler, but I appreciate you could kind of go on a different route on that.
Well, I mean, look, with Rollins and Ziggler, anybody that's ever followed me knows I'm a huge fan of Dolph's. I think he's been
criminally underrated.
Yeah, criminally underrated is the best phrase to put with him.
And misused. That guy should have been world champion 10 times over.
Why not? He's always reminded me of a young Shawn Michaels. And my personal difference with Shawn aside, everybody knows what I've said about Shawn. He's probably the best pure performer we've ever had in the ring. And so now you've got a young Shawn Michaels in your dressing room, and you push him to this level, and then you put him in a handicap match, and then you don't see him for 3 or 4 months. And then you push him to this level, and you don't see him again for whatever reason. And it's been maddening for somebody like me to watch it. Finally, they're getting somebody that can work, and they do nothing with them.
Yeah.
It's been like you want to bite your tongue every time they do it. Now, my guesstimation will be they'll put Seth Rollins over and just feed Dolph Ziggler to him, which I would think would be a...
But then where do you go with Dolph from there?
Good question. Well, they'll just, in their estimation, well, it's a TV show, so we'll just bring him back next week or the week after or next pay-per-view, and we'll put him against somebody else then. This is what they've done with him all along, right? And it's just, it's perplexing. You got a guy that's a master of the social medias and looks great in the ring, and there's always this right to here and then shoved back down. I can't explain it. It drives me nuts. I don't think Seth needs a win over Dolph, but I think for Dolph, a win over Seth Rollins could be monumental.
Yeah, especially in an Iron Man match.
Yeah.
Just goes with everything that he is.
Absolutely. So we'll be curious to watch and see what they do with it.
Yeah. What do you think of the whole Roman Reigns? He seems to be the most talked about guy for good or bad reasons, whatever. If you're a fan of him, so be it. What is your stance on Roman Reigns? Because he's been a very, very, I would say, huge topic on what I do on my podcast. I don't agree with it. I think WWE has failed for the last 4 years, and they continue to try again. Does he need to be a heel to be successful? well, now he is successful, but let me word that better. To be accepted the way Vince wants him to eventually.
Well, and this is what Vince needs to understand. Even Vince McMahon doesn't get to stop the rain. When the rain comes, it comes. So, if you look at from the very beginning, if you go back to the beginning, I'm introducing Seth Rollins. Roman Reigns. Vince is out there bragging that he's personally writing his promos. And then you hear Roman Reigns saying things like, suffering succotash, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, stuff from 1940s cartoons. Now, I've got 2 boys, 12 and 17.
Well, the last one, Vince, apparently Brock Lesnar is Vince's boy, but Roman Reigns is saying that. Who was to believe that?
Yeah, exactly. God, look, as much as to my chagrin, there was a time that I thought was pretty cool, and my kids think there's nothing cool about me. So if something from the 1980s ain't cool, 1990s ain't cool, early 2000s ain't cool to a 12 or 17-year-old, I'm going to take a stab in the dark that something in the 1940s is way out of cool. And yet that's how Vince presented Roman Reigns, and I think anchored him from the beginning. I think you could. I'm going to be careful. I don't want to give them any ideas, but I think there's a really simple way to get Roman over. Let's face it. He comes from the Inoue family, right?
Yeah.
Those everybody in that family knows how to wrestle when they're born. They're phenomenal. It's just bred into their DNA. So he gets the dark one.
Oh wow! Holy cow!
So, and a big one too. But
look at this Guinness ghoulish order for me.
But here's my question: you got a 6'6", 300-pound plus guy. Why would you cover him completely up? Ours is an aesthetic business.
He was not like that back in NXT. He was not like that.
Right. Take that vest off of him, and let him be him. Let the real Roman Reigns come out in those promos. Stop trying to write him a line. I was a pretty good promo guy, but if I wrote you a promo, my guess would be after anybody that's followed my career would start, if they had any inkling, they'd start to think, he's starting to sound like Shane Douglas, because we all speak in our voice. And no matter how hard we try to change that, we might change a phrase here or there, but in my writing, I write like I talk. And same as you, same as everybody. So let him be him. And he'll scrape his knees at times, and he'll make mistakes at times. But on the other side of that, instead of telling him to say suffer and succotash, where I can leap tall buildings in a single bound, that kind of stupid shit from 1940s cartoons, if you let Roman Reigns be Roman Reigns, the real him will come out.
Yeah.
And to date, I haven't seen that yet play out with Roman Reigns.
You mentioned, I kind of want to get away from the current product. You mentioned, how big of a fan of Dolph Ziggler you are.
Yeah.
I loved ECW back in the day when you were there and you were leading the charge as the number one guy there.
Thank you.
If you could put together a current, from Raw and SmackDown, a current triple threat, who would you pick and why?
Ooh.
Would Ziggler be one of them?
Yeah, he would certainly be in the running. I get asked this question a lot, and I defer immediately to Samoa Joe and Bobby Roode. Because I've worked with both of them as head of talent relations in TNA.
I see a lot of promo in Joe, very similar to what you used to do.
Yeah,
he's so good.
But more than that, he's also got the ability to go in the ring with an AJ Styles, a flying guy, and have a great match. And he can go in the ring with a Brock Lesnar and have a great match. And that takes a unique talent. That takes a special talent to be able to do that. I've always been a mark for Joe's work. Bobby Roode, to me, is a stud.
Another guy criminally underused right now.
To me, a stud that should have been a world champion 10 years ago. How he's not, somebody would need to explain to me today, because he looks great. He's a great guy. There's never going to be any drama with Bobby Roode. In other words, he's not going to not show up for a pay-per-view or a TV taping, and he can wrestle his ass off in the ring. So why exactly is he not being pushed? And this is not a push.
No.
Steve Austin used to say, if Vince McMahon wants to get you over, he'll strap a rocket to your ass.
Yeah.
And that direction is this. not this up and down, up and down, up and down like Dolph and we've seen with Bobby. I can't explain it. I am a huge fan of Bobby Roode's. Have been since I worked with him 11 years ago in TNA. But Dolph Ziggler would certainly be in the running. For me, the triple threat was always about, and so you understand, when we put the triple threat together, we were so used to seeing this, right, the four fingers. And that was such a ubiquitous, universally known symbol that we had, if we're going to come up with a heel stable in ECW, it couldn't be 5 guys. It couldn't take more guys to do what those guys used to do. So by virtue, it had to be less. So that brought us to the number 3. And as I started kicking ideas in my head, what goes with 3, triple, 3, and triple threat immediately popped out. And we had the different incarnations. Originally, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and me. And they left very short order to WCW at that time. And Candido was the next, and then Brian Lee. And Brian Lee was in ECW for a short period. And to be honest, I never got a full story in accounting as to why he was there and gone. But as soon as he left, Bam Bam was there, and Bam Bam went into that role. And that version of the triple threat, we had, Candido was, in my estimation, one of the most underrated guys in the history of the business. He could be dead asleep in the corner, and you tap and say, hey, Chris, you're up, and him wake up, splash some water in his face, go to the ring, and have a 5-star match. It was effortless for Chris. And I used to be so envious of that because I always had to work at it, and he would just go out there and do it so effortless, like he's breathing air. And Bam Bam was just Bam Bam. I mean, he
Hall of Fame next year?
He should be. He should be already. I've had fans ask me online about the induction, whatever. That's irrelevant. Who inducts him is irrelevant. Bam Bam Bigelow must be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
You've had a valet or two, tag along with you in your career.
Once in a while.
I am big on Andrade Cien Almas and Zelina Vega. I think that pairing is fantastic. With the art of valets managers kind of lost in WWE, why do you think that is? And do you think it's something that could certainly benefit today in 2018?
Absolutely. I mean, all those vestiges of what wrestling had always been. The managers, the valets. Francine wasn't just a pretty face sitting at ringside for me. She was a critical tool that I could use, and I don't mean to use the word tool, but she was a critical mechanism that I could use in my matches that allowed me to catch my breath, get some heat, take the attention away while I pulled the chain, whatever. It was an integral part of the franchise character, as was Tori Wilson, as was Lizzie Borden later. Why they've moved away from that and managers. I was one of those kids when I was 6 years old and watching professional wrestling here in Pittsburgh on WIIC, Channel 11. I was one of those kids that was watching the manager and was mesmerized by that person at ringside. They bring something else. It's if you put wrestler A in the ring with wrestler B and somebody else at ringside, being a valet or a manager, if that person at ringside knows what they're doing, they ought to be able to elevate that match beyond whatever special we can do in the ring. And yet we haven't seen valid managers for some period of time in WWE. Same thing with valets. Now we've had this whole diva rollout, which sort of pulls the attention away from valets, and I guess being a valet must be considered condescending today. I don't know. I never saw anybody disrespect Francine or Tori or Lizzie. There was a respect in the audience for them and what they were doing in the match, and they weren't seen as just TNA, no pun intended, at ringside. They were seen as a player in that match. And, so I don't take it in any way as being condescending, and I don't think Francine or Tori or Lizzie did either. Again, a vestige of the PC world we live in today.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. I know you probably get this asked everywhere you go. That night, you introduced the ECW Championship, you threw down the NWA Championship, cut an amazing promo.
Thank you.
What was your mindset before going into that? with that happening, and then after the fact when you laid your head down to sleep at night? What was the whole feeling of everything?
It was surreal because I had such a huge respect for the NWA. I was the kid that grew up, even though we didn't get the NWA here in Pittsburgh until around 1986 or so, and even then it was hard depending on what cable system you were on. I was the guy that loved wrestling. That's why I was such a big Ric Flair fan, Terry Funk fan, Arn Anderson fan, the Four Horsemen. For me, WWF, even then, at that time, was the way I viewed it was that they're the entertainment company and this is the wrestling company. So for me, watching it and having such that lineage back to the NWA, my concern going in was that I didn't want any of those guys that I mentioned in the interview. Before I'm backstage and I'm reading all the names and trying to remember all the names. And I finally got to the point where I thought, I can't possibly memorize all those names. I just have to go, if I'm going to do a promo, just go out and cut the promo. They'll pop into my head. I never, in a million years, would imagine that individual fans would start screaming out names, which was so powerful for the promo, because it told you the audience is bought into this promo. But my biggest concern going in was I didn't want my actions to be viewed as being condescending to the NWA or taking a shot at the NWA. I honestly, then and now, believe the NWA died 7 years before that, when WCW took over. And so I didn't want the fans to think that, and I certainly didn't want those guys that I mentioned to think that. That night, laying my head on the pillow after doing that, there was, back then we didn't have the option of these information pieces in our hands. We had to sort of wait for the information to roll in. And it was like, please God, let the fans see it the way I meant it to be. I didn't, like I said, never was intended to be shitting on any of those guys or the NWA. It was to be, they're dead, and this is where the industry is going now. Luckily, I think in hindsight, the fans saw it that way. I still get a fan here or there will come and say something, but it was, I think, by and large, accepted by the fans the way I meant it to be. And we were able to change wrestling for a short period of time in wrestling with ECW. So, but it was a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure.
Was there anybody that you absolutely loved working with, and on the same side of the coin, somebody that you just did not like working with?
Yeah, in ECW, my God, I loved working with just about everybody there. At first, I was averse to working with Sandman because I viewed myself as a technical wrestler, somebody who had learned the Bruno Sammartino and the Lou Thez way of wrestling, the Dominic DeNucci way taught us. So at that time I viewed Sandman as a gimmick in ECW, but when I left and went to WWE, WWF then, and came back, and I saw the connection that Sandman had made to the audience, and I realized everybody in that audience is him. You're never going to win that fight. Everybody in that building looks at him and sees themselves in him.
Yep.
And in that case, you lose every time. And when it got to that point, when I could see it to those eyes, it took a little bit of wrapping me in the head to see it. And when I saw that, I thought, then it crystallized in my head how I could work with this guy. How does my character play off of that? He's the ultimate babyface in
that's the same reason Daniel Bryan was so big 4 years ago.
Exactly.
That exact reason.
So easy to play off of, So I can't say there was anybody in ECW I didn't like working with, other than for me, I always wanted a guy that could go in the ring and perform on an extended period. Whether it be 15 or 20 minutes or 50 or 55 minutes, somebody that could deliver in the ring. And beyond that, I really had especially once I came back from WWF, because it sort of renewed in me the vim and vigor that was ECW. I had been away, thought I was going to go leave and make a bunch of money, and when I came back and I realized what a beautiful thing ECW was. For a guy like me that had been in the business at that point 15 or 16 years, ECW was the closest thing in the industry that I had seen as being what I heard from Bruno and Dominic and all those old timers, Larry Zbyszko, and the camaraderie those guys had, Johnny Valiant, Jimmy Valiant. I'd heard all these stories of how these guys all got along so great, and I'd never seen that except in ECW. I didn't see it before ECW, and I didn't see it in WWF when I went there. I saw that in ECW, so I loved it there.
We're going to end with this one. Right before we actually went live or recorded this, we were talking beer, and Shane is actually a big beer guy, and as I have this huge Guinness in front of me here.
I'm envious. He's got the dark beer, and I've got the light beer, so...
He actually...
From the crowd.
What's that?
Question from the crowd.
Question from the crowd?
I have a question from the crowd.
Oh, what? What is it?
Who would pose as Shane in the ECW retro show they just did?
Oh, that's actually a good, I don't know if you've seen that. Did you
Bobby Roode's the only one that would. Yeah, Bobby Roode's the only one that would.
There you go. Bobby Roode's the answer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up.
I could see Bobby Roode's the franchise. 3 fingers up.
Shane was mentioning that he's, what was the beer, the Brooklyn beer that you told me about? Brooklyn
Black Chocolate Stout.
Black Chocolate Stout.
Brooklyn Brewery. And Blackout Stout by Great Lakes.
And you guys know I'm a huge craft beer guy. If you had one go-to beer, what is it?
If I was going to be on a desert island, I could only have one beer.
Yeah. Because I'm a big, I don't know if you're familiar with them, Omegang. They're up in Cooperstown, New York.
Yeah.
And Three Philosophers is my favorite beer. That's my go-to beer.
Good.
Everywhere I go, that's it.
That's good stuff. You can't go wrong with that. But I'm in downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'm going to have to say I would have to go with Iron City beer if I was going to be on the island. With just one beer I could have, but my favorite beer in the world is a Dark Imperial Stout. But look, being born and raised in bleeding black and gold, you got to go with Iron City beer.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Off the script, the franchise, Shane Douglas here in Pittsburgh.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.